The problem with deep space listening posts is that they're not designed to keep you awake. The hum of the engines, the dim glow of outdated monitors, and the endless void outside the portholes, it's like being trapped inside a lullaby. Lieutenant Arlen Vex knew this painfully well. She was halfway through another mind-numbing shift, staring at a blinking panel that hadn't changed for hours. Trapped between the cold metal walls and the oppressive silence of space was a special kind of hell. If boredom could kill, we'd all be dead, Arlen muttered, her voice barely rising above the hum of the machinery. Next to her, Private Kip Reeve was slouched in his chair, controller in hand, playing a video game that looked older than him. "Speak for yourself, Lieutenant. I've got 5 lives left and I'm not wasting them on your melodrama." "5 lives, you said. That's 4 more than you deserve," Arlen shot back. Reeve grinned, eyes never leaving the screen. "You love me for my optimism, Lieutenant." Arlen rolled her eyes and returned to her screens. Optimism wasn't really part of the job description here, but it did keep Reeve from jettisoning himself out of the airlock in an act of ultimate rebellion. Not that she'd blame him. Another day at listening post Gamma 6, where the most exciting part of her day was wondering if the coffee machine would finally give up and start serving motor oil. "Hey, Vex," called out Sergeant Maya Torin, poking her head into the cramped control room. "Heard anything yet, or are we still the galaxy's most expensive eavesdroppers?" "Unless the signals have finally learned to speak in sarcasm," Arlen replied. "We're still picking up a whole lot of nothing." "Great," Torin said, running a hand through her short, spiky hair. "Let me know when you hear the sweet whispers of a paycheck." The door slid shut behind Torin, leaving Arlen and Reeve alone again with their digital ghosts. Reeve was right about one thing. If boredom didn't kill them, the sheer absurdity of their mission might. 3 humans, a tin can, and the universe's best-kept secrets. It was about then that the signal started. A low, rhythmic pulse like the heartbeat of a dying star cutting through the static. Arlen's attention snapped to the screen. For a second she thought it was just another anomaly. Cosmic radiation was always finding new ways to mess with her. "Reeve, are you hearing this?" Reeve paused his game, leaning over with feigned interest. His eyes widened. "That's new. Looks like the universe is finally ready to talk," Arlen said, fingers dancing over the controls. "Let's hope it's saying something interesting." Reeve squinted at the screen. "Or maybe it's just ordering takeout." The signal danced, patterns forming, dissolving, reforming. It was mesmerizing in its own cryptic way, like watching a language being born. Arlen adjusted her headset, leaning in closer. "I'll run it through the decryption software," she decided, punching in commands. "Could be nothing, but it's the most exciting nothing we've had in weeks." "Guess we'll find out soon enough," Reeve replied, his sarcasm dialed back a notch. "Or it'll just be space junk singing us lullabies." Minutes stretched into eternity as the program worked its magic. Arlen watched the lines of code scroll past, a silent prayer to whatever gods were watching. Please let it be something, anything, and then a voice. "Live from the Quadrant 61 Intergalactic Sports Tournament," Reeve blinked. Did the galaxy just invite us to a football game? Arlen's mind raced. Or maybe it's more like throwing us into the arena. The transmission continued, a jubilant announcer narrating events that defied imagination. Alien teams from across the universe, competing in games that made Earth sports seem like toddler playtime. Torin re-entered the room, a cup of what she generously called coffee in hand. "What's got your attention?" "We've intercepted a signal," Arlen said, eyes never leaving the screen. "Broadcasting what sounds like an intergalactic sports competition." Torin raised an eyebrow. "Well, that's a hell of a thing to stumble upon." "Think about it," Reeve said, leaning back. "All those aliens, all those games. Probably betting on which athlete spontaneously combusts first. Or which planet," Arlen added, "gets disqualified for unsportsmanlike behavior. Kinda makes you wonder what the prize is," Torin mused. "Hopefully it's not Earth." They shared a laugh, the absurdity of their situation a welcome reprieve from the tedium. After all, who else could claim to have front row seats to the universe's most bizarre sports event? The broadcast continued, channeling energy into their little corner of the cosmos. Exofootball, quantum relay races, zero-gravity wrestling, sports that seemed more hazardous than entertaining. "I'd put my money on Team Humanity," Arlen said, grinning. "We'd show him how it's done." "Only if they have a sport for procrastination," Reeve quipped. "We'd clean up," or sarcasm, Torin added. "We'd be unbeatable." The humor masked a growing unease. They were alone, listening in on something much bigger than themselves. The universe was vast, and here they were, spectators to its latest spectacle. "We should report this," Arlen said, closing the window on the broadcast and opening a new message to command. "Good luck with that," Reeve said, powering down his game. "They'll probably think we're drunk." "Wouldn't be the first time," Torin said. "But they might be interested. Could be the first alien transmission we can actually understand." Arlen hesitated, her fingers poised over the keys. "Do we want to understand it, though?" The room fell silent, the hum of the engines a reminder of their solitude. Out here, surrounded by the void, it was easy to forget just how small they really were. "I say we let them come to us," Torin said finally. "If they want an audience, they'll find one." "And if they don't?" Arlen asked. "Then we'll just keep listening," Reeve replied with a shrug. "Who knows? Maybe we'll hear something worth tuning in for." Arlen nodded, her hand hovering over the send button. "For now, we keep it to ourselves. See what else we can find." The decision made, they returned to their stations, the universe a little less lonely for their discovery. And as they settled back into their routine, Arlen couldn't help but wonder what other secrets the stars were hiding, waiting to be heard. The signal pulsed again, a steady beat against the backdrop of silence. An invitation or a warning, it was hard to tell. But whatever it was, Lieutenant Arlen Vex and her crew would be listening. Just when Arlen thought the universe had forgotten them, the signal pitched again, bouncing around the control room like an overzealous puppy. She tapped a few buttons, coaxing the archaic screen to regurgitate more information. The once joyful announcer was now replaced by a monotone voice, the kind that delivered bad news with a smile. "Attention, Earth," the voice began, robotic but with an edge of smugness. "Your participation in the Quadrant 61 Intergalactic Sports Tournament is expected. Failure to comply will result in disqualification from the galactic community." Arlen's jaw dropped. Did we just get a formal invitation to an alien sports event, with a side of threats? Reeve, still processing the transition from pixelated sprites to actual stakes, blinked slowly. "Typical. Earth gets invited to the universe's biggest party and we didn't even RSVP." "Great," Torin chimed in, her sarcasm sharp enough to cut through the static. "We've been threatened by a voice that sounds like it moonlights as a GPS system." Arlen ran a hand over her face, suddenly aware of how thin their line of communication with command was. "We need to decode the rest. Fast. If this tournament is as big as they're making it sound, we can't sit here playing pretend." Reeve snorted. "And here I thought my biggest worry was breaking my high score." "Welcome to the big leagues, Reeve," Arlen said, her fingers dancing over keys, pulling up data faster than a gambler on a losing streak. "We need to figure out the rules." "What kind of games are we talking about here?" The screen flashed, lines of alien script translating into a language they could grasp, albeit poorly. The list of events read like a kid's scribbled wish list, each description more bizarre than the last. "Let's see," Torin said, leaning closer, her voice a mix of disbelief and awe. "Fodom ball, graviton tag, and quantum leap frog." Reeve couldn't help but laugh, a harsh sound amidst the tension. "Sounds like they've got an interstellar kindergarten running this show. Except this time, the stakes are a little higher than nap time," Arlen countered, eyes narrowing at the screen. "We need to understand these games and fast. If we lose, it's not just Earth's reputation on the line." Torin's eyes flicked over the events, trying to make sense of the alien logic. "Looks like most of these games are versions of stuff we did as kids, but with a twist. A deadly twist. Deadly children's games," Reeve mused, shaking his head. Leave it to the universe to make hopscotch lethal. Arlen continued piecing together the rules, translating line after line with the urgency of someone defusing a bomb. Bottom ball involved bouncing spheres of energy between players, each sphere capable of incinerating a limb if mishandled. Graviton tag was a literal race against gravity, where losers found themselves buried 6 feet under, permanently. Quantum leapfrog. Well, it seemed the consequences of a missed jump were a one-way ticket to the vacuum of space. Maybe they mixed up our invitation with some death row inmates, Torin joked, but the humor didn't reach her eyes. Kids' games with a body count, Arlen said, leaning back, the weight of their situation settling in. We need to figure out how to turn this into an advantage. Fast, and how do you suggest we start training for this? Reeve asked, attempting to juggle optimism and skepticism in equal measure. I doubt we'll find a rulebook on Amazon. Torin crossed her arms, a grin spreading despite herself. Adapt, improvise, we've dealt with worse. Have we? Arlen shot back, raising a brow. Because I'm pretty sure this tops the list of crappy situations we didn't sign up for. Look, Reeve offered, we have a couple of things going for us. 1, we're humans. We're good at screwing things up and surviving anyway. 2, we've got a signal. Maybe we can learn from it, see how these games are played. Right, Arlen agreed. We watch, we learn, and we hope we don't become the galaxy's next cautionary tale. With the signal still pulsing in the background, they huddled around the monitor, watching alien teams made of creatures that seemed like they escaped from a sci-fi fever dream, participating in events that defied physics, logic, and sanity. Torin pointed at the screen, her voice dripping with disbelief. Is that a squid playing graviton tag? Yep, Reeve confirmed, shaking his head. And I thought we had a low bar for entertainment. Arlen scribbled notes, her mind working overtime to understand. Okay, we have to figure out how to mimic these games. We need something that resembles their playing field. Space isn't exactly a playground, Torin commented. Unless we count the part where it's trying to kill us. Then we make do, Arlen said, determined. We improvise, use the ship. It's not perfect, but it'll have to do. The ship, Reeve asked, incredulous. You want to turn our flying tin can into a sports arena. Got any better ideas? Arlen shot back, her patience as thin as the atmosphere outside. We can't exactly call home and ask for a field. We're it, Reeve sighed, conceding defeat. Fine, but if we start messing around with zero-gravity hopscotch, I'm claiming the first broken bone. Deal, Arlen said with a smirk. Let's get started before they decide to give our spot to someone more qualified, like a toaster. They spent the next hours configuring their limited space into a makeshift arena. The cargo bay became graviton tag grounds. Storage crates turned into obstacles for bottom ball. It was rudimentary, laughable even, but it was all they had. This is either going to be genius or get us all killed, Torin commented, surveying their handiwork. Reeve grinned, the thrill of the challenge invigorating him. I vote for somewhere in between. Remind me again why we're doing this, Arlen asked, hands on hips, dusting off what could only generously be called a playing field. Because, Torin replied, shrugging. If we don't, we're basically signing Earth's eviction notice. Arlen nodded, a grim determination settling over her. Then let's make sure we're still around to regret it. With their makeshift training ground ready, they started running through the games, each attempt as much an exercise in survival as it was in athleticism. Pressing buttons, flipping switches, they simulated conditions as best as the outdated tech allowed. Okay, Reeve, Arlen shouted, tossing him a sphere of energy. Think of it like volleyball. But with higher stakes. Reeve caught the sphere, feeling its hum beneath his fingertips. Just like a beach ball, except if it hits the ground, it's more like a grenade. And here I was thinking dodgeball was traumatic, Torin quipped, hands on her knees, breathing hard. They played with the urgency of those who knew the universe wasn't on their side. Laughing through the mistakes, cursing when things went wrong, picking each other up when they fell. The games were punishing, the learning curve steeper than an asteroid's surface, but they were human. And if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was adaptation. "Remember," Arlen called out, dodging a particularly aggressive sphere, "watch the screen. Learn from the professionals, the aliens, whoever the hell those guys are." Reeve nodded, his focus narrowing. "And if we win, then maybe Earth gets a say in its own future," Arlen replied, the weight of possibility in her voice. The Iors blended into one another, the ship echoing with the sounds of frantic movement, curses, and the occasional laugh. They were far from perfect, but every misstep was a lesson, every fall a chance to rise again. "Okay," Arlen said, calling a halt, her voice hoarse but firm. "We've done what we can here. We'll keep practicing, but we also need to prepare for the big picture." Torin nodded, wiping sweat from her brow. "And what does the big picture look like?" "Making sure we survive the tournament," Arlen replied, her voice steady, her resolve unshakable. "And hopefully proving Earth deserves its place out there, in whatever insane reality the universe has planned." They stood there, three humans in a tin can, with the weight of the world on their shoulders. But they were ready, or as ready as they'd ever be. As they turned to leave the makeshift arena, Arlen paused, looking back at the chaotic scene. "You know, I never thought I'd end up playing sports in space." Reeve laughed, the sound breaking the tension. "Life's full of surprises, Lieutenant, but hey, at least we'll have one hell of a story to tell if we make it back." "Yeah," Torin agreed, her smile genuine despite everything. "Assuming anyone will believe us." With that, they headed back to their stations, the signal still pulsing through the ship, a reminder of the challenge ahead. They were outmatched, outgunned, and out of their minds, but they were human, and if nothing else, they were stubborn. The universe was watching, and for now, that was enough. Arlen stood in front of the archaic screen, hunched over and squinting like she just realized someone swapped her coffee for motor oil. The rules of the alien game sat there, mocking her in their indecipherable glory. The alien script was translated, sure, but it was like asking a toddler to summarize Moby Dick. Ambitious, but ultimately unhelpful. "All right, team," Arlen grumbled, fingers tapping an erratic rhythm on the console. "Let's pretend the universe isn't actively trying to screw us over for a second. What the hell is a quantum leapfrog supposed to mean?" "Sounds like a metaphor for our lives," Reeve chimed in, his eyes glued to yet another outdated monitor. "You leap, you miss, you float into oblivion." "Standard stuff," Torin snorted, crossing her arms. "If nothing else, we're consistent, always one bad decision away from disaster." "Bad decision, good decision," Arlen shrugged. "In space, it's all the same. Vacuum doesn't care about your moral compass." The manual was like a demented cookbook with half the pages missing. Fodham ball was now clearer. Think soccer, but swap the ball for a Death Star. The energy spheres they'd scrounged up were a decent match, assuming you ignored the potential for limb incineration, which Arlen thought was a feature, not a bug. "All right," she said, "if we're gonna do this, we need to think outside the gravity well." She glanced at Reeve, whose fingers were twitching over his video game controller like it held the last sliver of his sanity. "Reeve, any ideas?" He looked up, brow furrowed in concentration. "Well, I'm no physicist, but maybe we simulate the leapfrog in zero-G. Skip the part where you drift into the sun." Torin chuckled darkly. "Yeah, because the real problem here is a lack of sunlight." Arlen allowed herself a small smile. "Right, so we use the cargo hold for zero-G practice." "It's not much, but hey, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king." At that, Torin raised an eyebrow. "In space, the one-eyed man usually dies of oxygen deprivation." "Details," Arlen replied, waving a dismissive hand. "Now, graviton tag. Let's assume it's tag, but with gravity trying to murder you." "So, like every mission we've ever been on," Reeve said, leaning back in his chair. "Exactly," Arlen affirmed. "It's all about survival, and maybe a bit of luck." "If we're depending on our luck," Torin added, "we might as well start writing our wills." The alien footage on the monitor provided little more than a blur of activity, as if filmed by a drunk using a potato. But Arlen's eyes narrowed, catching glimpses of strategies, techniques. Aliens with more arms than sense, navigating gravitational fields like they were born to it, which, to be fair, they probably were. "All right, let's get practical," she said, straightening up. "We need to practice these moves. Get them into our muscle memory if we don't want to end up as cosmic roadkill." "Muscle memory," Reeve mused, "from a bunch of muscles that probably haven't moved since we got stationed here." "Time to shake off the rust," Arlen declared, clapping her hands. "We're going to make this work, we have to." "Or what?" Reeve asked, eyes meeting hers. "Or Earth gets disqualified and we're forever the planet that couldn't pull its galactic weight." "Something like that," Torin said, heading toward the cargo hold. "We're either heroes or the laughingstock of Quadrant 61. No pressure." With their makeshift training ground set, they plunged into their practice sessions with the fervor of the desperate. Arlen tossed an energy sphere to Reeve, who juggled it with surprising dexterity, muscles remembering what his mind could barely comprehend. "Nice catch," Torin called, dodging an errant throw. "Just remember, if you drop that, it's curtains." Yeah, Reeve replied, focus unwavering. "Who knew PE class would end up being life and death training?" Arlen chuckled, not unkindly. "I'm still waiting for dodgeball to save my skin." They practiced until limbs ached and nerves frayed, each of them falling into a rhythm that was almost comforting, if you ignored the existential dread hanging over them like a guillotine. Mistakes were made, many mistakes, but each one was an opportunity to recalibrate, to become less of a liability and more of a long shot. "All right, enough," Arlen said finally, holding up a hand to call a halt. "We're getting there, but we need to hit the books, figure out these rules before we screw up something we can't walk away from." "More reading," Reeve groaned, his fingers twitching, aching for the familiar feel of the controller. "I'd rather juggle plasma grenades." Torin picked up a crumpled printout of the rules, scanning it with the resignation of someone being asked to solve Fermat's last theorem with finger paints. "You'd think they'd at least throw in some diagrams." "What, you can't visualize quantum decapitation?" Arlen asked with a smirk, leaning back and stretching her arms. "It's like they want us to fail." "Can't blame them," Reeve said, tossing the energy sphere with a bit too much enthusiasm. "We are kind of pathetic." Torin caught it deftly. "Speak for yourself, Reeve. I happen to be excellent at not dying." "Let's keep it that way," Arlen muttered, rubbing her temples. "Because right now I'm not seeing any volunteers to explain to Command why we turned Earth into an interstellar pariah." They paused for a moment, each reflecting on the magnitude of their task. Humanity had always been a stubborn species, punching above its weight class since time immemorial. But this was something else entirely. "Okay," Arlen said, breaking the silence. "We study, we practice, and we try not to die. Sound good?" "Good," Reeve laughed, the sound tinged with hysteria. "It sounds like the most ferociously underwhelming plan ever, but I'm in." "Same here," Torin added, a determined glint in her eye. "We've faced worse odds." "Not really," Arlen replied, but there was no bite to it, just acceptance. "But let's pretend we have." The next few days passed in a blur of study and simulation, each of them pushing their limits in ways they hadn't thought possible. They debated tactics, argued over interpretations of alien rules, and bonded over their shared predicament, the camaraderie born of desperation and dark humor. "Look at us," Torin said one day, pausing to catch her breath. "We're practically a team." "Yeah," Reeve agreed, eyeing the monitors that displayed an alien game in progress. "A team that might be about to become a footnote in some galactic history book." "Better a footnote than forgotten," Arlen replied, wiping sweat from her brow. "We're doing what we have to." The alien footage continued to roll on the monitors, each bizarre tactic and madcap strategy only further highlighting how out of their depth they were. Better players than them had likely perished in these games, but they had something those others didn't: the sheer bloody-mindedness of humanity. "Okay, final stretch," Arlen announced, rallying her team for one last push. "Just remember, if at first you don't succeed, blame Reeve," Torin suggested, Reeve feigned hurt. Now that's just unkind. Try not to die, Arlen finished. Let's make sure they remember us. The training continued with more than a few missteps and close calls, but through it all they learned. They adapted. They found their footing on alien ground, and slowly, through sheer determination, they carved out a fighting chance. "All right, team," Arlen said, looking at her ragtag group with something approaching pride. "We're as ready as we'll ever be." Reeve grinned, tossing the energy sphere from hand to hand. "Then let's show the galaxy what we're made of. Or at least not embarrass ourselves too badly," Torin added. With a final nod of agreement, they headed back into the fray, ready to face whatever the universe threw at them. They were underdogs, sure, but they were human underdogs, and that had to count for something. The day was just another shade of gray in the endless void of deep space. Time had become a meaningless concept, measured only by the grumbling of stomachs and the flickering of failing fluorescent lights. Arlen Vex sat hunched over a console, her eyes scanning the jumble of alien hieroglyphs on the screen. It was like trying to read an instruction manual written by a committee of lunatics. At least the coffee tasted less like motor oil today, a small victory in a galaxy full of losses. Reeve was sprawled in his chair, controller in hand, his eyes locked onto the simulation of an alien game. "If this is what aliens do for fun, I'd hate to see their version of a root canal," he said, fingers dancing over the buttons. Arlen smirked. "Maybe their root canals come with complimentary lobotomies. Keeps the patients from noticing the pain." "Yeah," Reeve snorted, "and the rest of us from noticing how screwed we are." Their current predicament involved figuring out the nuances of Quadrant 61's intergalactic games, a task they approached with the same enthusiasm one might reserve for tax season. The rules were a twisted labyrinth, a collection of bizarre rituals and unpronounceable terms. It was competitive spirit mixed with potential bodily harm, a real crowd pleaser. Sergeant Maya Torin sauntered in, her expression a cocktail of skepticism and cynical amusement. "So, how's our little circus act coming along?" Arlen pushed away from the console, stretching like a cat that had just woken up from a long nap. "We're making progress." "If by progress you mean finding new ways to screw up, hey, that's something," Torin replied with a shrug. "Most people wouldn't even manage that." Reeve threw his hands up in mock despair. "We're redefining success here. Failure is just success in progress, right?" "That's what they tell people who flunk out of flight school," Arlen replied dryly. "But sure, let's go with that." Despite the odds stacked against them, the team had begun to piece together a semblance of strategy. The alien games were nothing if not eclectic. Quantum leapfrog was something they had deduced involved jumping and floating, possibly over quantum hurdles or into metaphorical pits of doom. They decided to approach it as a kind of deranged hopscotch. Made sense in the kind of way where nothing made sense at all. Soon the crew found themselves in the cramped cargo hold, transformed into an impromptu training ground. They had sketched a crude hopscotch grid on the floor with tape, stepping between the lines with the awkward grace of a newborn giraffe. Torin, watching from the sidelines, chuckled. "We look ridiculous." Arlen grinned, hopping from square to square. "At least we're consistent." "Yeah, consistently ridiculous," Reeve added, joining in the jumps. "If aliens are watching, they're probably laughing their multi-eyed asses off." "Good," Torin said. "Maybe they'll underestimate us." "Underestimate us? We're practically begging them to," Arlen retorted, landing with a solid thud on a square marked with a crudely drawn alien symbol. But hey, all part of the plan. The alien games, bizarre as they were, had a rhythm to them. The more they played, the more apparent the patterns became. It was a twisted dance of chaos, and the team was slowly learning the steps, albeit with two left feet. "All right, leapfrog break," Arlen called out, wiping sweat from her brow. "Let's move on to Graviton Tag." "Ah, Graviton Tag," Reeve mused, tossing an energy sphere from hand to hand. "Tag, you're it, and by it, I mean probably about to be crushed by unexpected gravity shifts." "Exactly," Arlen nodded. "And we're the ones who have to figure out how not to become space pancakes." The team gathered around a monitor showing footage of the alien game in action. It was like watching a group of hyperactive children on a sugar high, darting between gravitational anomalies with disturbing ease. Arlen tapped the screen, indicating a particularly complex maneuver. "See that? We're going to try and replicate it, or die trying." "With our luck, probably the latter," Torin remarked. Her voice was a blend of determination and gallows humor, a recognition of their likely fate that somehow managed to be comforting. They set up an obstacle course composed of crates and barrels, each representing a different gravitational hazard. The idea was to dodge, weave, and dart through the course without getting metaphorically flattened. Reeve took the lead, a feral grin on his face. "All right, Gravity, show me what you've got." He dove into the course, moving with surprising agility for someone who spent most of their time glued to a chair. The others followed suit, stumbling and tripping, each misstep an opportunity to learn, or at least a chance to laugh at their own ineptitude. Torin was next, her movements a blend of military precision and sheer bloody-mindedness. "Come on, you've faced worse," she muttered to herself, leaping over a crate. "Remember that time on Juno 12? That was a real clusterfoo. Less reminiscing, more dodging," Arlen interjected, skirting around a barrel and barely avoiding a collision. "Right," Torin grunted, ducking under an overhead beam. The Iors stretched on, and slowly they found a rhythm. It was a far cry from the elegance of their alien counterparts, but it was something. They were no longer just reacting, they were adapting, learning to anticipate the unpredictable. "Okay," Arlen said, panting as she called a halt. "Not bad, still alive. That's a win in my book." Reeve flopped onto the floor, his breathing heavy. "I don't know what's worse, this or the fact that I'm getting used to it." "Maybe both," Torin replied, offering a hand to help him up. "But we're getting there, inch by inch." "Inch by inch," Arlen echoed, her voice tinged with something almost like hope. "We might just stand a chance." They retreated to the control room, collapsing into chairs with the exhaustion of the damned. The alien footage continued to roll on the monitors, a constant reminder of the task ahead. Arlen leaned forward, staring at the blurry images. "There's a pattern here," she said, her voice firm despite the fatigue. "We just need to find it." "Patterns," Torin sighed, rubbing her eyes. "You ever think the universe is just one big pattern and we're the ones who can't see it?" "Every day," Reeve replied. "But then I remember the universe doesn't give a damn about us. And that's what makes us special," Arlen added, a wry smile playing on her lips. "We're the idiots who care anyway." In the days that followed, they threw themselves into their training with renewed vigor. Each day brought new bruises and insights, the two often arriving simultaneously. They replayed the alien footage until the images were burned into their retinas, dissecting every movement, every possible advantage. Reeve found himself dreaming of the games, his subconscious trying to map out strategies while he slept. He mentioned this to Torin one morning over a breakfast of rehydrated eggs. "I'm either losing my mind or I'm starting to get the hang of this," he said, stabbing at his food with a fork. "Both," Torin replied, not missing a beat. "But that just means you're one of us now." "Great," Reeve muttered, "just what I always wanted." Arlen walked in, cup of something caffeinated in hand. "Status report. We're still alive," Torin said. "And Reeve's been having prophetic dreams." Arlen quirked an eyebrow. "Prophetic dreams. Careful or we'll start calling you the Oracle of Gamma 6. "I'd prefer Survivor of Gamma 6, Reeve shot back, "but I'll take what I can get." As the tournament loomed ever closer, the sense of urgency grew palpable. They had improved, no doubt, but whether it would be enough was another question entirely. The stakes were higher than any of them had bargained for, and the knowledge of Earth's fate resting on their shoulders was a weight that threatened to crush them. "Just remember," Arlen said one evening as they gathered for one last practice session, "whatever happens, we did this together." "A team," Torin agreed, cracking her knuckles. "Yeah," Reeve said, looking at his fellow misfits. "The best damned team this side of nowhere." They returned to their makeshift training ground, the cargo hold a familiar setting. This time, the games felt different. They moved with a confidence born from hard-won experience, each step a testament to their resilience. Quantum Leapfrog became a dance, an intricate ballet of jumps and dodges, each member finding their rhythm. Graviton Tag was a game of cat and mouse, a heady mix of anticipation and reaction, moments of near disaster turned into opportunities. "All right, folks," Arlen called, bringing the session to a close. "I think we're ready." Reeve shot her a dubious look. "Ready as in prepared or ready as in resigned to our fate?" "Bit of both," Arlen admitted, a grin tugging at her lips. "That's the spirit," Torin said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Now let's go show the universe what we're made of." They filed out of the cargo hold, weary but determined. They had come far from the hapless crew who had first received the signal, their journey one of survival, adaptation, and begrudging camaraderie. "Whatever happens next," Arlen said, leading the way, "we face it together." "Together," Reeve echoed, falling into step beside her. As they made their way to the control room, the weight of the task ahead felt less daunting. They were underdogs, but they were human underdogs, and that had to count for something. The universe might not care, but they did, and for now, that was enough. The control room of Listening Post Gamma 6 was about as lively as a graveyard. The outdated monitors flickered with ghostly alien footage, each jump and leap a cruel reminder of the team's inadequacy. It was like watching your pet goldfish try to compete in a dog show, painful and slightly pathetic. "Well, we're boned," Reeve said, his voice a cocktail of defeat and gallows humor. He was slumped in his chair, eyes glued to the screen as an alien performed a move that defied at least 3 laws of physics. "A bit early to throw in the towel, don't you think?" Arlen replied, though her tone didn't quite reach optimism. More like optimism's bitter, divorced cousin. "Throwing in the towel sounds proactive," Torin chimed in, arms crossed, eyes scanning the alien footage like a predator sizing up the competition. "This is more like getting wrapped up in the towel and tossed into a cosmic dumpster fire." Arlen sighed, rubbing her temples. The past few days had been a brutal cycle of training, failing, and creative swearing. The games were ruthless, the patterns elusive, and the stakes higher than an addict at a spaceport casino. "We've got to figure something out." "Great," Reeve said. "Another pep talk. Those are about as helpful as a laser gun at a knife fight." The team had been at it for hours, attempting to replicate the alien maneuvers with all the grace of a drunk octopus on roller skates. Every failure was a gut punch, each misstep a reminder that humanity might not have a place in this intergalactic circus. "Okay, let's take 5, Arlen finally said, needing a break from the endless display of alien gymnastics. "I'm sure our alien overlords can wait a bit to laugh at our incompetence." Torin snorted. "Yeah, they probably have a whole popcorn machine set up just for this." The silence that followed as they stretched their legs was as comforting as a gravity malfunction. Reeve made a beeline for the coffee, which had the dubious quality of being both lukewarm and slightly burnt. He took a sip and grimaced. "Tastes like regret." "Better than nothing," Arlen replied, though she wasn't entirely convinced. The footage continued rolling on the monitors, taunting them with its impossible acrobatics. It was like the universe had a twisted sense of humor. Here they were, a ragtag bunch of underdogs, expected to save humanity from being laughed out of the galactic community, and failing spectacularly. "Why is it that every time I think we're making progress, I realize we're actually just lining up to get our asses handed to us?" Torin mused, staring at the screen with the intensity of someone trying to will it into submission. "Because we're human," Reeve suggested, shrugging. "And humans are specialists at overestimating their own competence." Arlen chuckled darkly. "Yeah, it's practically our species' motto." They returned to the footage, trying to dissect every movement, every strategy. But the more they watched, the clearer it became that they were way out of their depth. It was like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube with your eyes closed while being pelted with tomatoes. "Something's missing," Arlen said, frustration evident in her voice. "We need—" "I don't know, an edge." "An edge," Torin echoed. What we need is a miracle, Reeve sighed, rubbing his eyes, or a cheat code. The mood in the room was as heavy as a neutron star, each member grappling with their own version of despair. They weren't just fighting for themselves, they were representing all of Earth, and right now it looked like Earth didn't stand a snowball's chance on Mercury. What if we just don't show up? Reeve suggested half-heartedly. Pretend our ship got lost, space is big. Who's going to know? We would, Arlen said firmly. We'd know. And that, Torin added, would be the only thing worse than losing. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken fears and shared frustrations. They were soldiers trained for warfare, not whatever this was, but running wasn't an option. Not if they wanted to keep a shred of dignity. All right, Arlen said at last, her voice cutting through the gloom like a knife. We regroup, we keep at it. Because if there's one thing humans are good at, it's being stubborn as hell. And screwing up, Reeve added helpfully. And screwing up, Arlen agreed. But mostly the stubborn thing. Torin nodded, her expression one of determination tempered with a healthy dose of skepticism. Fine, we keep going. But if we crash and burn, I reserve the right to say I told you so. They returned to their makeshift training ground, the cargo hold still strewn with crates and barrels. The familiar setting did little to soothe the anxiety gnawing at their insides. Quantum leapfrog was first on the agenda, their choreography a blend of desperation and muscle memory. Each jump was a leap of faith, each stumble a reminder of the stakes. They moved through the course with grim determination, a sense of camaraderie forged in shared humiliation. Gravit and tag followed, the adrenaline-fueled game of dodge and counter-dodge a grueling test of agility. The rules were simple, avoid the invisible gravitational traps. The execution, however, was anything but. Here we go, Reeve muttered, eyeing the course with a mix of dread and resolve. Who needs dignity anyway? Not us, Torin replied, taking her position beside him. If we had any, we lost it days ago. The course was an obstacle nightmare, each crate and barrel a potential pitfall. But they'd gone through it enough times that instincts took over, the movements almost automatic. Almost. Reeve took the lead, navigating the course with the reckless abandon of someone who knew exactly how many ways things could go wrong. Torin was hot on his heels, her military training evident in every precise step. Arlen watched, her heart in her throat. Careful, there's a... Too late. Reeve hit an invisible gravitational snag, the sudden pull sending him sprawling. Torin swerved to avoid him, but she too was caught in the shifting gravity, the two of them tumbling in an ungraceful heap. Great, Reeve groaned from the floor. I always wanted to be a human pancake. Torin untangled herself with a grimace. Well, that was catastrophic. But informative, Arlen offered, trying to put a positive spin on their misfortune. Informative, Reeve echoed incredulously. I'd call it humiliating. Both, Torin said, brushing herself off. But hey, at least we're consistent. They regrouped, bruised but unbowed. It was a small comfort knowing they were all equally terrible. Misery, after all, loved company. All right, let's try again, Arlen said, steeling herself for another attempt. And maybe this time we won't end up as a cautionary tale. The Iors dragged on, each attempt a slog through frustration and fatigue. But they were nothing if not persistent, each failure a stepping stone in their bizarre journey. As exhaustion set in, Arlen called for a break. They gathered in the control room, collapsing into chairs with the bone-deep weariness of those who had given everything they had to give. Well, Torin said, breaking the silence, if nothing else, we're impressive in our ability to not give up. Yay for stubbornness, Reeve said dryly, lifting his cup in a mock toast. Our one superpower, Arlen chuckled, though there was a hint of despair in the sound. We'll figure it out. We have to. And if we don't, Torin asked, the question hanging in the air like a guillotine blade. If we don't, Arlen replied, then we go out swinging. It wasn't much, but it was something. A promise in the face of overwhelming odds that they wouldn't go quietly into the void. All right, Arlen said, standing. Let's give it one more shot before we call it a night. Maybe this time we'll get lucky. Famous last words, Reeve muttered, but he pushed himself to his feet all the same. They returned to the cargo hold, the setting now as familiar as their own skin. The night stretched on, each failure a notch against their pride, each small success a reminder that they were still in the game. And despite everything, they held on to hope, because in the end, that was all they had left. Arlen Vex sat at the console, bleary-eyed and wrestling with a stubborn thought that had lodged itself in her brain like a tick. It gnawed at her, despite the cacophony of failures echoing in the cargo hold, where Torin and Reeve were busy trying to outdo each other in creative expletives and spectacular wipeouts. "This isn't working," Torin declared, sprawled on her back after another unsuccessful attempt at graviton tag. "I swear these aliens must have a tentacle up their sleeves or something. Or maybe they just have more sleeves," Reeve quipped, helping Torin up with a mock-serious nod. "You know, alien advantage. More sleeves, less sense," Torin grumbled, dusting herself off. Arlen chuckled, though it was more a reflex than a genuine expression of humor. Her mind was elsewhere, trapped in the labyrinth of her own thoughts. Something about this whole mess felt familiar, like a bad dream she'd once woken from but couldn't quite shake. "All right, folks," she said, standing up. Her eyes flicked towards the monitors that continued to mock them with every pixelated somersault and lethal pirouette. "Let's try something different for a minute." Reeve raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" "Because unless you've got a direct line to the galactic gods, I'm not seeing a way out of this cluster." "Chess," Arlen interrupted, the word escaping her lips before she fully realized she'd said it. "Chess," Torin repeated, skepticism oozing from every syllable. "We're trying to learn alien death sports and you're suggesting chess. Think about it," Arlen pressed on, her excitement growing despite the incredulous looks being shot her way. "It's all about strategy, right? Outmaneuvering your opponent, anticipating their moves. And here I thought we were just trying not to die," Reeve said, folding his arms. "You know, minor detail. Trust me on this," Arlen urged, her voice tinged with the kind of desperation that often accompanies great ideas or terrible mistakes. "The aliens might be physically superior, but what if we can outthink them? Strategy over strength." Torin exchanged a glance with Reeve, a silent conversation filled with dubiousness and a hint of reluctant curiosity. "All right," she said finally, relenting. "So what's the plan? We challenge them to a chess match instead of a sports tournament." "Not exactly," Arlen replied, leaning against the console. "But if we can apply the principles of chess to their games, we might stand a chance. You know, turn this whole thing on its head." Reeve rubbed his chin as if considering. "So less run for your life and more think like a commander. I guess it beats getting flattened every 5 minutes. We can call it quantum chess. The reckoning," Torin joked, though her interest was clearly piqued. Arlen smiled, feeling a flicker of hope amidst the overwhelming odds. "Exactly. We just need to learn how to read the board." With renewed purpose, the trio gathered around the console, Arlen pulling up the game footage once more. This time, she wasn't focusing on the flashy moves or impossible feats of agility. Instead, she searched for patterns, hints of strategy buried beneath the chaos. "Look at this," Arlen pointed at the screen, pausing on a particular sequence. "They're not just jumping around randomly. There's a method to their madness. Like a dance," Reeve said slowly, seeing the rhythm in the chaos. "A deadly, acrobatic, physics-defying dance. The kind that ends with us in traction," Torin added with a dry laugh. "Or victorious," Arlen countered, though victory felt like a distant, almost mythical prospect. They spent the next few hours poring over every second of footage, dissecting each move like surgeons with a particularly stubborn patient. The more they watched, the clearer it became that their alien opponents were playing a game both physical and cerebral. "Remember that time we played Capture the Flag with the Federation team?" Torin asked, a nostalgic glint in her eye. "We didn't win because we were faster. We won because we outsmarted them. By hiding the flag in plain sight," Reeve recalled with a grin. "They spent so much time looking for it in the woods, they never thought to check the obvious spots." "Exactly," Arlen nodded. "We outthought them. That's what we need to do here. The air in the control room felt different, charged with a new energy. They weren't just going through the motions anymore. They were planning, strategizing, turning their weaknesses into an advantage. "All right," Arlen said, her mind buzzing with possibilities. "Let's break it down. Torin, you take point on analyzing their defensive strategies. Reeve, look at their offensive patterns. I'll try to piece together their endgame." "And when we figure all this out," Reeve asked, arching an eyebrow. "Then we stop playing by their rules," Arlen replied, a steely determination in her voice. "We make our own." The Iors bled into each other as they worked, each piece of the puzzle falling into place with painstaking slowness. It was a grueling process, but with each revelation came a renewed sense of purpose. "Look at this," Torin said, pointing to a section of footage. "Their defense isn't just reactive, it's predictive. They're anticipating our moves before we make them." "Typical alien know-it-alls," Reeve muttered, though there was a grudging respect in his tone. "So we need to be unpredictable, throw them off their game." "Like a feint," Arlen suggested, followed by a blitz. "Hit them where they least expect it." The plan was forming, a delicate dance of deception and surprise. It was risky, but at this point, what did they have to lose? The days that followed were a blur of training and strategizing, their once chaotic sessions gaining a newfound sense of purpose. They weren't just reacting anymore. They were adapting, evolving, turning the alien strengths against them. And in the heart of deep space, where time was as unreliable as the coffee machine, the change in the team was palpable. They weren't just surviving, they were fighting back. "Ready for another round?" Arlen asked, standing in the cargo hold, the familiar setting now transformed into a battlefield of strategy and cunning. "Always," Torin replied, her eyes gleaming with determination. Reeve cracked his knuckles, a mischievous grin on his face. "Let's show these aliens what human ingenuity looks like." They took their positions, each movement deliberate, each step calculated. The cargo hold became their chessboard, every crate and barrel a piece ready to be moved into place. "Remember the plan," Arlen called, her voice steady. "Unpredictability is our weapon. Let's make them earn every inch." The game began, their movements a symphony of calculated risk and bold strategy. They danced through the course, each feint and counterfeint a testament to their growing expertise. Torin executed a perfect feint, drawing their hypothetical opponent into a trap of their own making. Reeve followed with a daring blitz, turning defense into offense with a flicker of movement that defied expectation. And in that moment, as Arlen watched her team execute their plan with a synchronicity born of hard lessons and stubborn resolve, she felt a flicker of something she hadn't dared hope for. Hope. "That was not terrible," Torin said, breathing hard but grinning all the same. "High praise coming from you," Reeve replied, equally winded but sporting a triumphant smile. Arlen nodded, heart swelling with pride. "We're getting there, one step at a time." It wasn't a miracle, but it was a start, a glimmer of a solution on the horizon, waiting to be seized. And as they regrouped for another round, the tired jokes and shared laughter filling the hold, Arlen felt the weight of doubt lift just a little. They weren't there yet, but they were closer. "All right," she said, feeling the determination thrumming through her veins. "Let's keep going. We've got a tournament to win." The path ahead was fraught with challenges, but for the first time since this mad journey began, Arlen felt like they might just have a fighting chance. After all, they were human, and if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was refusing to quit no matter how insurmountable the odds. "Onwards to glorious failure," Reeve declared, raising an imaginary banner. "Or unexpected victory," Torin countered, her tone light but her eyes serious. And with that they dove back into the fray, their spirits buoyed by the knowledge that they were not just pawns in this game, they were players. In the vacuum of space, where silence reigned supreme and the stars watched like ancient sentinels, Lieutenant Arlen Vex and her team steeled themselves for the challenges ahead. They were ready as anyone could be in the face of the unknown. "So," Reeve said with a smirk, "who's up for rewriting the rule book?" Arlen grinned, feeling the fire of possibility burning bright. "I am. and with that they returned to the fight, determined to carve their own path in the stars. In the great, dark void of space, where hopes go to die and caffeinated beverages fuel the faintest flicker of ambition, Earth's finest, or at least Earth's only, representatives prepared for their debut in the Quadrant 61 Intergalactic Sports Tournament. Somehow, Lieutenant Arlen Vex and her motley crew of misfit space jockeys had convinced themselves they were ready. Ready to stake humanity's claim in a tournament designed by beings who probably used quantum physics as a bedtime story. Arlen surveyed her team, a ragtag bunch of idealists and cynics who'd somehow fallen into a rhythm like an off-key piano. Private Kip Reeve, ever the snarky optimist, and Sergeant Maya Torin, whose skepticism was only rivaled by her sarcasm, were her stalwart companions in this endeavor, if one could call it that. "Here we are," Arlen announced, her voice dripping with the kind of false bravado one reserves for ill-fated ventures, "the grand arena of doom." "Great," Reeve said, twirling the video game controller he'd somehow smuggled into his kit. "I've always wanted to meet my maker on a stage too big to fit in my nightmares." "The stage is set," Torin added, glancing around with a mix of awe and horror. "The sacrifices of logic shall be bountiful." The arena, a colossal monstrosity of alien architecture, loomed before them. It was alive with the hum of intergalactic spectators who looked like they'd come straight from the last page of a biology textbook. The outdated monitors flickered with the announcement of Earth's participation, the equivalent of throwing a cub into a den of lions and expecting it to come out with anything other than a bad limp. "Remember," Arlen said, her gaze fixed on the inscrutable alien crowd, "it's not whether we win or lose, it's how creatively we fail. Speak for yourself," Reeve muttered. "I, for one, am aiming for an epic, unforgettable collapse," Torin chuckled, strapping on something that might generously be described as protective gear. "Well, let's give these aliens a taste of human innovation, like our revolutionary healthcare system or our perfectly functioning democracy." Reeve rolled his eyes. "Yeah, because that's definitely the kind of innovation that'll save us now." The alien announcer, a gelatinous blob with a voice like a malfunctioning robot, boomed through the arena, explaining the rules of the first event. Fod'em ball. Imagine soccer but with balls made of unpredictable energy, capable of vaporizing the unprepared or unlucky. Just the kind of casual pastime you'd expect in the distant reaches of space. As the game began, Reeve and Torin took their positions, eyeing the alien players who glided across the turf with the kind of effortless grace that suggested they'd been playing since the Big Bang. "Remember," Arlen called from the sidelines, "think like chess players, not like cannon fodder." "Easier said than done when the chess pieces are trying to atomize you," Reeve shot back, dodging a particularly aggressive energy sphere. The alien team made their first move, a dazzling display of agility and precision that left the human team scrambling. Reeve took a hit to the pride, narrowly avoiding an energy ball that buzzed past his ear with a sound like 1,000 angry bees. "Watch it," Torin yelled, executing a feint that would have impressed even the most cynical of dance critics. "I'm watching," Reeve replied, mostly as my life flashes before my eyes. Despite the chaos, Arlen could see the strategy forming. Their alien opponents were predictable if you squinted hard enough and ignored the 3 laws of physics they routinely defied. There was a rhythm to their madness, a methodology to their mayhem. "Time for Operation Human Chaos," Arlen shouted, hoping her voice was carrying over the din. Reeve nodded, moving into a new position with Torin. They began to weave a pattern of unpredictability, a dance of misdirection and cunning that turned the alien team's precision against them. "Is it working?" Reeve gasped, sweat pouring down his brow. "Only if our plan was to confuse them by acting like we've never played before," Torin snapped, though there was a glint of amusement in her eyes. Arlen watched with a mix of trepidation and pride as her team began to pull off the impossible. Their opponents hesitated, unsure how to counter a strategy that defied basic logic and common sense. Reeve made a pass to Torin, who executed a move that looked suspiciously like a backflip, launching the energy sphere into the alien goal with a satisfying explosion of light. The crowd roared, or at least made a noise that could be interpreted as such, and for a moment it almost felt like the humans might have a shot. "Did we just score?" Reeve asked, disbelief etched on his face. "Looks like it," Arlen replied, grinning like a madwoman. "Now, let's see if we can do it again without dying." The game continued, each moment a blur of frantic activity and desperate maneuvering. The human team, against all odds and reason, began to adapt and innovate, using their knowledge of chess and a healthy dose of chaos theory to keep their opponents guessing. The alien team, for all their superior speed and strength, found themselves outmaneuvered by beings who, moments before, had looked more likely to trip over their own feet than score a point. "Never thought I'd be grateful for all those hours playing video games," Reeve panted, as he dodged another energy sphere. "Yeah, turns out button mashing is a transferable skill," Torin quipped, lunging forward to intercept an incoming shot. As the final seconds of the game ticked away, the humans held their breath, every neuron firing in desperate anticipation. The energy sphere arced through the air, moving in slow motion, a glowing harbinger of either victory or defeat. "Come on," Arlen whispered, willing the universe to cut them a break. The sphere struck the alien goal with a flash of brilliance, and the arena erupted in a cacophony of alien cheers and human disbelief. They had done it. Against all rational expectation, they'd secured a victory. "We did it," Torin said, her voice a mixture of awe and disbelief. "Don't sound so surprised," Reeve replied, though the grin on his face suggested he was just as shocked as she was. Arlen joined them on the field, her heart pounding with a mixture of relief and exhilaration. "Not bad for a bunch of amateurs." "Huh, speak for yourself," Torin said, her characteristic snark softened by the glow of triumph. "I'm already planning my retirement," Reeve laughed, clapping Arlen on the shoulder. "Well, if this whole space thing doesn't work out, we can always join the circus." The alien announcer blathered something unintelligible, presumably congratulating the Earth team on their unforeseen upset. The alien crowd seemed to be in a state of collective bemusement, unsure how to process what had just happened. "Think they'll want a rematch?" Reeve asked, eyeing the alien team who were huddled together, likely plotting how to avoid embarrassment next time. "Probably," Arlen replied, taking in the scene with a smile. "But for now, I think we've earned a little celebration." As the humans walked off the field, basking in the glow of their unexpected victory, they couldn't help but feel a surge of hope. Perhaps they weren't just intergalactic punching bags after all. Maybe, just maybe, they had a chance to carve out a place for humanity in the stars. "All right," Arlen said as they regrouped in the locker room, the adrenaline still coursing through their veins. "What's next on the agenda?" Torin suggested, rubbing a particularly sore spot on her shoulder. "And maybe some cake," Reeve raised an eyebrow. "Cake, yeah, to celebrate the fact that we're not dead," Torin replied, her expression a perfect mix of deadpan and earnest. Arlen laughed, feeling lighter than she had in days. "All right, cake it is. Let's enjoy this while we can, because who knows what fresh hell tomorrow will bring." As they prepared to leave the arena behind, each of them felt a sense of camaraderie and accomplishment that made the long hours of preparation worth it. The path ahead was still fraught with uncertainty and danger, but for now they could savor their small victory. "Onwards, then," Reeve declared, gesturing grandly toward the exit. "To the future, or at least to the next meal. And to rewriting the rulebook," Arlen added, feeling a warmth that had been absent for too long. As they walked into the unknown, buoyed by the knowledge that they'd faced the impossible and emerged victorious, Arlen couldn't help but believe that they might just be capable of anything. In the endless expanse of space, where the stars blinked like distant eyes and the universe watched with bated breath, humanity's first step into the intergalactic limelight had been taken. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. And for Arlen and her team, it was only the beginning. Listening Post Gamma 6 wasn't exactly the most happening place in the universe. In fact, you'd have to dig deep into the multiverse's schedule of cosmic events to find a duller locale. However, today it was buzzing, and not just because the outdated monitors were trying to mimic an epileptic disco party. The aftermath of the Quadrant 61 Intergalactic Sports Tournament had transformed the place into the unlikely hub of potential human diplomacy, or what passed for it when the diplomats were more familiar with controllers than conventions. Lieutenant Arlen Vex was sprawled in what could only generously be called a command chair, with a swagger that suggested he might actually believe he deserved to be there. "Well, we didn't die," he announced, as if this was a personal victory akin to inventing the wheel or discovering fire. Sergeant Maya Torin, who had spent the last few minutes trying to coax some life back into her arms, smirked. A low bar, but hey, sometimes that's all you need to trip over into success. Private Kip Reeve, who had taken to pacing like a caged animal trying to figure out how to escape captivity, chimed in. "I always said if you can't beat them with skill, confuse them with whatever the hell we did out there." "Right," Torin nodded. Operation Human Chaos really caught on. "I'm sure they are still picking bits of their logic circuits off the floor. Can't believe the aliens are even considering us as equals," Arlen said, idly spinning in his chair. Who knew all it took to impress the universe was haphazard luck and the inability to follow basic instructions. That, or they're just curious about how we're not extinct yet, Reeve quipped, tossing the now infamous video game controller from hand to hand. It had been smuggled aboard against protocol, but who was really keeping track of that anymore? "Regardless," Torin said, stretching her arms above her head, "the point is, we've made an impact. And somehow it's not a crater," Arlen chuckled. "I guess it's true what they say, failure is just success in progress." Reeve grinned. "In that case, we're damn near geniuses." The monitors, still flickering with images of their unlikely victory, now displayed a stream of alien transmissions. Requests for interviews, discussions, and a few indecipherable invitations that looked suspiciously like dinner invitations, assuming your idea of dinner involved being the main course. "Guess they want to know our secret," Torin mused, half seriously, half wondering if they'd get away with claiming it was some ancient earth magic called winging it. "Let's just hope they don't ask for a demonstration," Arlen replied, "because I'm fresh out of miracles and caffeine." Despite the humor, there was a palpable sense of accomplishment hanging in the air, a realization that they'd done something remarkable. They'd taken the first shaky step into the galactic community and hadn't immediately slipped on a cosmic banana peel. Reeve stopped his pacing, looking at his teammates with something approaching sincerity. "You know, I didn't really think we'd make it this far," he admitted. "But now that we have, it feels like we might actually have a shot at this whole galactic relations thing." "Don't get too cocky," Torin warned, though her smile betrayed her own disbelief. "We've got a long way to go before anyone starts naming galaxies after us." "True," Arlen agreed, "but at least we're not starting from scratch. We've got a foot in the door, even if it's just because nobody's bothered to slam it shut yet. And we did it without any of the usual earthly politics," Torin added, "which is a miracle in itself." Reeve raised his imaginary glass. "Here's to practical diplomacy, the art of not getting vaporized for being idiots." In the midst of their banter, a new transmission came in, lighting up the console with an urgency that suggested something more than just pleasantries. The message was from the organizers of the tournament, expressing a desire to meet with the human team. It seemed the aliens were eager to discuss what humanity could bring to the table besides their inexplicable ability to survive. "Well, look at that," Arlen said, a hint of pride sneaking into his voice. "We've got a meeting with the big leagues. Do you think they're actually impressed or just curious?" Torin asked, leaning over to read the details. "Does it matter?" Reeve replied. As long as they're talking to us and not dissecting us, I'll take it as a win. The transmission indicated a location within the arena complex, a place where the team would presumably meet representatives from various species. Arlen tried not to think of it as a zoo exhibit, though the comparison was disturbingly apt. "Well," he said, clapping his hands together, "let's go charm some aliens and see how far we can push our luck." The team made their way through the labyrinthine corridors of the arena, the architecture, a bewildering mix of styles that defied any known engineering logic. It was the kind of place that made you question whether gravity was more of a suggestion than a law. As they approached the meeting room, they could hear the low hum of alien conversation. The doors slid open, revealing a group of beings that made the eclectic crowd from earlier look positively mundane. There were creatures with too many limbs, eyes that blinked in unsettling rhythms, and skin that shimmered with colors that didn't exist on any earthly palette. "Wow, they really rolled out the welcome mat," Reeve muttered, eyeing the assembly with equal parts trepidation and fascination. Torin nudged him. "Behave. We're diplomats now, remember, right?" Reeve said, adopting a mock-serious tone. "Act like you belong. Don't eat anything that's still moving." The meeting began with formal introductions, each alien representative speaking in their own language, which was instantly translated by the chip implanted in each human's head. It was a marvel of technology that still occasionally glitched, resulting in some rather amusing mistranslations. The lead alien, a being with a head like a writhing mass of worms and a voice that could strip paint, welcomed them, expressing gratitude for their participation and admiration for their unexpected victory. Arlen took the lead, thanking the aliens for the opportunity and explaining that their success was a testament to human adaptability, and though he didn't say it, sheer dumb luck. Torin added her own brand of charm, discussing Earth's culture and the potential benefits of exchange. It was the kind of diplomatic speak that could have come straight from a well-rehearsed script, though her delivery was anything but scripted. Reeve, for his part, managed to not say anything that would get them immediately disqualified from existence, which was a victory in itself. The aliens listened intently, their expressions inscrutable, though their body language suggested interest. As the conversation flowed, Arlen couldn't help but feel that they were on the brink of something significant. Humanity, for all its flaws and follies, was on the cusp of becoming a part of something much larger. The meeting ended with promises of future collaboration and mutual benefit. The humans left the room with a sense of relief and accomplishment, their minds racing with possibilities. Back in the listening post, the team gathered around the console, their energy buoyed by the day's events. They'd come a long way from the days of monotonous signal monitoring and futile attempts to stay awake. "So, what's next on the agenda?" Torin asked, sinking into a chair with a contented sigh. "World domination," Reeve suggested, only half joking, "or maybe just a good night's sleep." Arlen leaned back, surveying the room with satisfaction. "How about we play it smart for a change? Take things one step at a time. Pragmatism." Reeve gasped in mock horror. "Who are you and what have you done with Arlen Vex?" Torin laughed. "I think I like this new version. Maybe he'll actually start listening to us." "Don't get ahead of yourselves," Arlen warned, though there was a twinkle in his eye. "I'm still me, just slightly less reckless." As the team settled into a comfortable camaraderie, the future seemed a little less daunting. They'd proven themselves on the galactic stage, not just as competitors but as potential allies. "All right," Torin said, breaking the reflective silence. "I guess it's time to start writing those diplomatic speeches." Or, Reeve countered, "we could invent a new game and challenge the aliens to that. Something with less chance of us getting obliterated." "Sounds like a plan," Arlen agreed, feeling optimistic for the first time in a long while. "Let's make sure humanity stands out for all the right reasons." As they laughed and joked, the universe beyond the listening post continued its endless dance. The stars twinkled with possibilities, and the humans, against all odds, were ready to join the celestial ballet. For Arlen, Torin, and Reeve, the journey had only just begun. But if today was anything to go by, it was going to be one hell of an adventure.